All right, good morning. I get you back today. I don't like sharing them. Right? But they're really especially Jazzy. I really like her. She's really sweet. The one who's younger. I felt mean to say that, but the one who's younger, right, just as an identifier with the pink jacket. How about that? But I hope that I know last time isn't the easiest of topics, right? I know it's not. It's definitely something that I have worked with a lot as a therapist. I have a lot of people that I've known in my life, all the way down to like a parent who have been suicidal. So I appreciate you doing the best that you can with hanging in there with that. And I just wanted to kind of open it up to talk about it for a minute before we move back to this. Any like comments? I mean, helpful, not helpful? What do you they'll stay between us? Like I won't necessarily tell them, be like, they said it was awful. But any like reactions or thoughts about what they shared or the topic of suicidality, anything from last time before we kind of go back to where we were before? Helpful, not helpful? Recommend again or not? Or you lucked out, you didn't have to do the role play. The role play is like the most awkward thing ever, and normally they get to that, and they did not. The role play is one of you is suicidal and one of you is the intervention person, the convince them to go get help. And then she was gonna show me the video, I'm like, there's 2 minutes left, don't. And it didn't work painfully. I'm trying to look at her like, no, you're out of time, don't even try. But I don't know, any reactions? Anything? Neutral? Yeah? Okay.
When I filled out the form, I thought I knew less than I did.
Okay.
So it was good to have that like support.
Sure. Anybody else? I think those numbers are really helpful, right? I hope that you kept them or wrote them down, jotted them down. I love that there's a crisis text line. I think that that's so much more accessible for a lot of people. Sometimes we don't have time to sit on the phone for a long period of time, but texting is easier and it feels a little safer, I think, for some people as well. My personal philosophy with suicidality has always been to overreact rather than underreact. She always shares that story with her son. I'm like, her poor son who said like, I'm going to kill myself if I don't get my skateboard or whatever. And like, I just imagine this like awful scenario unfolding where, that was reacted to so seriously. But I always think it's better to overreact than underreact. Somebody will forgive you for caring too much about them, but can I forgive myself for not doing enough? That's always just kind of been my personal philosophy, especially when I was a therapist. Right, when I was training to be a therapist, this would be something that comes up. And honestly, it was one of the reasons why I didn't stay with therapy, because it was really hard to sit there and worry about a client and wonder, are they going to come back? And I felt like if I ever had someone who didn't come back, I wasn't sure I would recover from. Right, like if I had done enough. And we would make things like no suicide contracts, as silly as that sounds. Like you won't do anything until I see you next, right? Or like you can't do X until like something else happens. Or I've walked students to the health center like quite a few times, right, just to make sure that they were okay. So I think it's better to overreact. Now, do I agree with the statement that no one will ever be mad at you for overreacting? No, right? I've had people be upset with me, but I can live with that. Right, I would rather someone be upset with me and get some care and be checked in on and be fine than me have to be upset with myself for not doing it. And so that's always been the philosophy I've had. I think it's always important to know your audience. Like my mother-in-law, I love my mother-in-law, but I always pick on her. She will say stuff like, "Oh, I'm just going to kill myself over everything." Like she had a surgery like not that long ago and she can't drive, and like every other day it's like, I would rather be dead than do this again, right? She doesn't mean it. Like she's not going to do anything about it. Is it insensitive to say yes? Do I react to it anymore? No, and so I think it's important to know the people in your life, right? If somebody that you know well is saying things that cause you concern, check in on them, do something about it, right? Even if it's just as simple as letting them know you care and you would miss them or whatever it might be. It's not an easy thing to navigate, but it is important to react when we can and to react in the best way that we can. So I like that they kind of went through, ways to not ask questions and versus asking. What are some of your resources, like the health center, or even calling the police in a super life or death kind of scenario. Like, you don't want to do that on your friend if they express like they're not doing well. You don't want to call the police and have them sent to their house. But if they're somewhere and you feel like they're going to do something and you can't help them or don't feel safe, that is a great, resource for you to have. So keep those tools maybe kind of in your back pocket. Put that certificate on an application, right? If you're applying to another school or for a job, put that on there. Couldn't hurt, right? It might look really good. It might help you to stand out. And again, I'm not going to be covering that topic since they lectured about it. Definitely know what QPR stands for at the very least, and then obviously look over the slides and stuff like that. But any other like stories or thoughts or questions or comments, anything else related to that topic? Anything else at all? Okay. Hopefully everyone's all right. Everyone seems kind of, it's Wednesday, right? In the middle of October. We're hitting that point of the semester where it's starting to get like a little bit tough, but Halloween's also coming. So that's good, right? Right. Did I tell you that I blew a fuse in my yard because I put so many lights out? Yeah, I fixed it and my lights are epic again, right? My children said that my lights look good. And so I felt proud for 1 minute. And then we went driving and looking at other people's lights and they were like, well, ours could be better. Oh, you guys are so mean, right? Our lights are not scary. So they didn't make the list this year. There's like a list in CME of like the best houses. I try every year to make the list and I didn't make the list, right? But that's okay. Our house has become known as the spider house, which just makes me laugh because I hate spiders so much. But I have like spiders hanging everywhere and like a spider web that I put out and like a tunnel with spiders on it. I'm like, why did I do so many spiders? I should have done something else. I don't want to be the spider house, right? Then I need to fix it.
Spiders because don't really like spiders.
I hate spiders. I hate them so much. But I found these 3 cute little like inflatable spiders, and I was like, oh, it's like my 3 kids, right? And then I just kept going with the spider theme. So maybe next year I'll go more toward the witch theme. I added witches this year. Yeah.
Maybe you could take a lot of those like little like plastic spiders that look realistic, use them as a form of like button.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't even want to touch them, but yeah. No.
Yesterday, I had to fight a moderate spider. I almost lost my life. But
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I would survive that. But yeah, I mean, I love the idea. And that might be the enemy. Those little plastic spiders, even them, I'm like, ugh. So every spider I have is like smiling with like a hat on. Like they're like so unrealistic that they're cute, Yeah.
I work in the writing center.
Yeah.
And I decorated for Halloween.
Yeah.
And I put like, we have like all these like little fake spiders. And we actually I had a student come in.
Yeah.
And she like literally was like freaking out because of all the spiders.
Yeah.
And so I literally took the one that was on our table and I just threw it across the room. I was like, okay, we're done with that.
Yeah.
We're not, like,
Let's get rid of that.
She was just like, I can't with the spiders. I'm like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of those little plastic spiders. They look real enough.
They're just little enough and they're kind of fuzzy. And
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah, I'm okay when they're like huge. When it's like the really big ones where I'm like, that's not real, unless you're in like Australia or something. Then it could be, right? I was at Target and they have this giant, it's like this big and it's orange and it lights up by batteries. And I was like, oh, that's huge. And that would never be real unless I was in like Texas or Australia. Right? Anyway, I hope you're all hanging in there and doing okay. I know this is a kind of getting like a lull in the middle of the semester, but it is the best month of the year, if that helps. And hopefully your fantasy football team isn't as decimated as mine if you have one. I've like lost everyone on my team due to injury. I don't even have a running back to start this week. I started telling my wife that and she just glazes like, I don't care. Like, that's it. All right. Well, I'll tell you because you have no choice but to listen to me. Anyway, anything else? Doing okay? Anything else before we come back? Okay, so we'll jump back into mood disorders. We have a little bit left of that, not a ton. We talked obviously a lot about depression, and now we're gonna add another element, right? And so remember when it comes to, I forgot, did I start this? Yes. So my rant about spiders has been recorded. So we talked about depression. You have to have a depressive episode, right? To have unipolar or major depression. Now we're going to talk about if we add a manic episode. So a lot of people will have depression. They never have mania. They never have a manic episode. It's just unipolar depression. And I mean, just as in no mania present, not that it's not severe. But if we experience a manic episode, which we'll talk about here, then we can qualify for what's called bipolar disorder. And it used to be called manic depression because people had a manic episode and depressive episodes, but they changed the name of it because we have something also called hypomania, or mania like light, if you will. But bipolar disorder is a challenging one. It's one of the more severe disorders, or at least it can be, like everything else that's on a spectrum. But with bipolar, people have alternating periods of mania and depression, oftentimes with like normal mood in the middle, right? So they might have long periods of normal mood. You might have more depression than mania, more mania than depression. But manic episodes are a very up and agitated experience. And if you've ever had one yourself or known someone who's had one, they have a lot of potential for like dangerous consequences or harmful consequences, especially if they're severe. So let's look at some of the like criteria. So for a manic episode, in order to qualify as a manic episode, you have to have 3 or more symptoms. So 3+ symptoms. And they last for 1 week. Okay, so remember, a depressive episode's 2 weeks. For a manic episode, it's only 1 week, right? And sometimes we even say 5 days. I've heard both, but between 5 days to a week, right? So they're lasting, but not nearly as long. They tend to cause significant distress and impairment, like everything else. And so some of them, one symptom is inflated self-esteem. If we stop there, that doesn't sound so bad, right? Like, oh, I feel better about myself. But it's often to the point where we call it grandiosity. It's inflated self-esteem and like grand ideas without any basis in reality. So it's like, I'm going to go out and like start a business with no experience, no money, no nothing. It's just like these wild kind of grandiose ideas and schemes that cause you to have like an inflated level of self-esteem that isn't necessarily grounded. It's almost like a harmful level of like grandiosity. There's a decreased need for sleep. Sometimes when people are in a manic state, they don't sleep at all, or they sleep very, very minimally. It's very common. You have a hard time falling asleep, hard time staying asleep. There's a lot of talkativeness, like a pressure to keep talking. And it's also something that might be very fast. It's almost like someone had too many cups of coffee, right? In the way that they're talking. It's very pressured. It's very quick. It might even be kind of all over the place. Sometimes we call this the flight of ideas. So things are kind of loosely connected, like you're jumping from thing to thing really quickly, but there's still like a thread of connection. They're just, your mind is racing, right? And you kind of have like a flight of ideas that goes with it. There's a lot of distractibility, increased amount of like distraction. It's hard to focus, right? Oftentimes because you're having a flight of ideas and you're restless and you have a lot of like agitation. There's a lot of psychomotor agitation. Tapping, fidgeting, pacing, walking, like moving, like clicking your pen. Like I think I gave you that example of my student that would just click, right? It's a lot of like mindless, like psychomotor stuff that you have. And then the last one is there's an increase, how can I shorten this here? In pleasurable activity. With a high potential for consequences. Sometimes when people are in a manic state, they go on shopping sprees, when spend money that they don't have, right? And they get themselves into trouble because they put themselves into debt. Or they go out and they like have unprotected sex with a bunch of partners, or start using drugs in some way, or put yourself in situations that are dangerous, right? There's so a lot of activities with a high potential for consequences. It's like the judgment is out the window because you almost feel like you're immune from it, or you're just not even aware of it because of that grandiosity and increased self-esteem element. So oftentimes people get into danger or trouble or have consequences after the manic episodes have subsided. You also sometimes see anger and like angry outbursts or violent outbursts. In very severe cases, people might hallucinate or have like delusions of grandeur, like thinking that they're very like important or grand or like immune from consequences. There's a lot of like poor judgment that comes in these states. Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Like sounds weird.
Anyway, but it could be like, I mean, in a sense, like obviously that's not a pleasurable activity, but like it's almost that lack of comprehension or judgment or understanding of your actions. Could kind of see it that way. Yeah, it might not be, but there could be an awareness of like the hopelessness of being stuck in these cycles or like the episodes and wanting to stop that. And that could be part of like the motivation behind it. That's not the most common, but obviously, it could happen. Not so much, not usually in a manic episode. More common in a depressive one, but it's definitely possible. Like it's not abnormal, but it's not common, if that makes sense. Other thoughts? I don't know if any of you know someone with bipolar disorder. Any comments or thoughts or stories? Yeah.
Does this ever get confused for like ADHD?
So a couple of elements in common, right? Distraction is common with ADHD. Psychomotor agitation, common with ADHD. Lack of sleep can be common as well. That pressure to like keep moving and talking. We also see some common elements with borderline personality disorder, like this one, the potential for consequences and some of the like grandiosity a little bit, or like the self-esteem. So there's a lot of little common threads, but there are things that are different too, right? Like, and we'll talk about ADHD more, but that one tends to be in people who are younger. It tends to have other like attention related things that are more common. So you have to kind of look at the big picture because some of them are similar, right? They can manifest in some similar ways. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Before the schizophrenia, my son had started with bipolar.
Mm-hmm.
So had a ton of these things. It was exhausting.
Yeah.
It was exhausting for him. But like we'd wake up to loud noises or something's crashing, or we're on a rather big piece of property, so he would pace on the property.
Sure.
One day it rained and he paced in the house, and I checked his steps, and he had walked 6 miles a day inside. A lot of the fast talking, I had to ask him over and over again. I'd like get him to slow it down, say one word at a time.
Yeah.
It was a lot.
Yeah.
Once he did get hospitalized, it was like such a relief.
Yeah, and especially, knowing what's going on so you can then treat it. And it's tricky. We'll talk about schizophrenia, obviously, like a little later. And this can go to like the extreme of where we call it like derailment and a couple of other things that we'll get to, where it can be this like to a more extreme level, like with schizophrenia, and the hallucinations sometimes can overlap in extreme cases. Yeah.
He's like, can I at least work out with the Olympic?
Yeah.
Athletes,
Right, and that's this piece, right? Of like, I'm not an athlete, but I'm gonna train now, and I'm gonna go to the Olympics, and it's like, well, usually people start that from a very young age. Not to say it's impossible, right? But it's that like, it's not grounded in reality, right? And then there's even something called schizoaffective disorder, where people have these elements of bipolar and elements of schizophrenia, right? And then you see that overlap. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
At one point, he was a runner, and so he looked up what did runners eat, and then said nuts, and then he only wanted to eat nuts, and he.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, right, and challenging, right, challenging. There was another Canterbury, yeah.
Maybe testing other than.
For, how do you mean like testing?
Like, I don't know, I'm surprised I get more than like test to run on it and see if I.
Oh, so like what they, yeah, so like the effectiveness of like how the drugs work. But so oftentimes they do start with like animal trials, and what they do is they watch like the synapses firing with like high powered like instruments to see how they're firing, how the drugs are affecting them, testing blood, testing all those things. And then doing human trials, which some of the first ones can be quite scary, right? Not 100% knowing how they're going to affect someone and how they're going to work. But without that, we don't understand the mechanism of action. And sometimes people's struggle is so severe that it's worth the risk, right? And so it tends to start with that, and then moves into human trials, and then sometimes back and forth as you're trying to figure out that mechanism of action.
I have a similar like brain similar.
Yeah, it's typically a normal brain. It's obviously there's no way of squeak twice if you're depressed, right? Right. Yeah, I mean, so it's a matter of like you have a typical rat, and what you would see is how that would affect. It's a lot of like hypothesizing, right? So like, okay, we give this medication and it appears to flood with serotonin. And so like if serotonin is the culprit, then we can hypothesize that it would do this in a person if they were flooded with it. Yeah, because obviously, you know, finding like with some pets, like because we had a dog when I was a kid who was depressed, and my parents put that dog on Paxil, like or Prozac or something like that. Like so my parents, I'm like, we were medicated a dog, right? And so like with bigger animals with higher level cognitive functions that we can observe more easily, like a dog or something like that. Sometimes you can actually see the symptoms of depression and then test it in those animals. With rats, it'd be much harder to notice.
Do you notice all, but not all the same disorders, but like, do you realize they actually similar?
They can, yeah, animals can experience some of these. I mean, some of them are impossible to know, but like, I mean, I've seen animals with depression, right? We can definitely see things like that, like in kind of an observable way. And sometimes they do prescribe antidepressants. Like I said, for my dog was on Prozac for like a year, right? It didn't, I don't know if it helped him, like, again, bark twice if you're feeling better. Like, I don't know, like it, but you can see the sleeping more and the like lethargic stuff. It's just much harder to diagnose when you can't ask what's going on. So it occurs, but it's not as common by far. Yeah.
Do we know if the neurotransmitters were the cause of manic episodes?
Yeah, we'll get there. It's similar, a lot of the similar stuff, but there's also some interesting like chemical pieces to it, like with ion activity, which we'll talk a little bit about. And I think what makes bipolar disorder so hard is it can be like dealing with two very different people, right? Like if somebody's depressed, they don't get out of bed, they sleep all the time, they don't want to do anything, I'm worthless, I have no pleasure in life. Then they switch to like a manic episode. They might not sleep at all, I can do everything and anything, they're moving a million miles a minute. I grew up with a mother who had bipolar disorder, and it was always like, which version of her are we going to get today? Like we go to wake her up and we're going to get like manic mom who like runs a million miles a minute, wants to do everything and is like, go, 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 go. Or are we going to get mom that doesn't get out of bed and is like depressed and we have to leave her alone? Like, and so you can kind of almost, it feels like two different people at times, especially when it's severe. If it's mild, you might not notice it, but this can almost feel like two different people when they switch from episode to episode. I don't know, any experiences with that or stories around that? Any comments? Yeah, questions?
Different cultures perceive this sort of, those things myself is where we don't panic episode of different cultures even encourage that type of behavior, because you can say that if they were in a depressive area in their life or episode setting for
Mhm.
months they weren't doing anything. And then they switch to manic episode, they started doing things or seeing and grandeur. And you even say, go as far as say they were being productive to some extent.
Yeah.
Would it be encouraged and would it be like treated differently or treated?
So kind of two different questions, right? So it's definitely viewed and treated differently in different cultures. Some cultures don't recognize things the same way we do. In Ireland, there's a very different view of mental illness than here. And it's more of like a community like care idea than like medication and things like that. It's not pathologized as much. But manic episodes are almost never, I would never say they're encouraged because they're destructive. Like when we talk about hypomania can be wildly productive for people. A lot of artists and musicians and people who create have hypomanic episodes and are able to harness them in a very productive way. Mania tends to get people into trouble, right? So I wouldn't say it would be encouraged, but I mean, it's at least a different state, right? That maybe might be different than the depression, but it's often more damaging than the depression in terms of like the consequences.
I had a friend of mine, where I used to live in San Francisco, and hearing about this kind of makes more sense as to what you were saying.
Sure.
And I remember that something would be difficult at times because, as you said, it could either be a depressing mood or a state of meaning.
Yeah.
While both sort of think it's oh my god, exactly.
That was what it was. Yeah.
And the sad thing was that he never in one of those cases, really sad cases, he never did get the treatment that he needed.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, now with like everybody's registered, we guys are things that we should get out. But growing up, we have like we'd say like, yeah, he'd go to a manic episode or have episodes of mania.
Yeah.
But he'd be productive and he'd go around and encourage that because he was doing something like
Sure.
Like, that's like what a lot of people say. It's like you're doing something to want to do or encourage this behavior. So I don't know how that would affect his or how it would affect his.
Yeah. And if the manic episodes are like productive, then it's, so we'll get here in a minute, but that would be what's called bipolar 2, right? And sometimes when people have those productive hypomanic episodes, we don't treat that side, right? We just focus on the depressive side, which might be more damaging. But when people have like full-blown manic episodes, they often require treatment. And like you were saying, like once you know what it is, it's just that there's a different level of understanding that comes with that of like, oh, that's what it is. Like that's sometimes that helps to know, right? Like you get that label, like you were saying with your son, right? Too, of like, now I know what to do, how to help, how to treat, how to understand, and what I can do to support. Yeah.
My mom's uncle had bipolar 1.
Yeah.
And like he one time came at my great grandparents with a knife. That's
Wow.
how like intense his manic episode was.
Sure.
And for a long time he was actually institutionalized because it was a little while ago.
Sure.
And so, but then when they started closing down all the institutions, he ended up just moving back home. And it was just really sad because like after his parents passed away, he lived on his own, but his life kind of fell apart.
Yeah.
He stopped taking his meds. He got into some really reckless behaviors. And it ended up just like destroying his life. And then when he was towards the end of his life, he just ended up being in a nursing care facility because he couldn't take care of himself.
Yeah.
And it was really hard because like my mom ended up having to like go and help take care of him. And even the nurses would be like unsure because he could get violent when he was manic. And so it was definitely very hard, especially for my mom's dad to like watch his brother go through that.
Yeah. Right. And it can be scary too. People can become violent, right? It can and manifest as like violence and anger toward other people. It's not the most common, but it happens a fair amount, enough that it is, potentially one of the things that are up here. I have a clip of this Silver Linings Playbook. If you've seen that movie, the main character has bipolar disorder, bipolar 1, and definitely gets into trouble in manic episodes, with anger and outbursts and things like that. I have a little clip of that I'll play for you. There's a little bit of swearing in it. The title of the clip over something that like isn't that big of a deal in like the long run, right? And he throws the book out the window, like a really like violent gesture, right? An aggressive gesture. So it can manifest that way, or it can be, something where it's more like lack of sleep and like just kind of impulsive, reckless decisions. But this manic episode qualifies somebody for bipolar disorder. And again, if I go back to this slide, there are 2 types, right? 2 main types. Bipolar 1 is more severe, and bipolar 2 is less severe in terms of the upside. So both of them have the exact same major depressive episode. The only difference between these two is the level of mania versus hypomania. So if somebody has bipolar 1, they have full-blown manic episodes, full-blown depressive episodes. If they have bipolar 2, they have mild mania, which we call hypomania, and major depressive episodes. So again, the only difference is the hypomanic versus manic level of that. And with both of them, right, the treatments are typically very similar, though hypomania isn't always destructive, as we just talked about. Sometimes it can actually be quite productive for people if they're able to harness it, right? They're sleeping less and they have a little higher self-esteem, but they're not quite so grandiose and not grounded in reality. So it can sometimes be a productive state, but the depressive episodes might be what you really need to focus on treating. Yeah.
When you used to play classic guitar, so I could always, you come and go in the hospital and back. And I could always give him the guitar and see where it's at, because sometimes he could play the song and it was beautiful, and other times it was just frantic.
Really interesting.
This is interesting to watch. And yeah, he kept crashing the bikes. His dad would just, I think, be fixing the bikes for a while. And one day we woke up and there was the music stand on the floor, on the ground outside the house, covered in pickle relish, Cheerios, mustard. Like, what is this?
An assortment. Yeah, right. And I mean, manic episodes can be challenging, right? For that person and also for the people around them who might be subject to whatever behaviors are coming up. And it can be mild too. I mean, sometimes these are on the milder and obvious. And over a course of 2 years. So it's like a much milder form of bipolar disorder, very commonly missed. You could just easily mistake this for personality, right? As people kind of have milder ups and downs. So instead of like huge arching like ups and downs, it's more like a little bumpy, but not as pronounced, right? Or as profound. So cyclothymic is like a longer term, milder form, but there's really 2 forms of bipolar. And then again, that's why they changed the name from manic depression to bipolar disorder. Some causes and treatments, a lot of overlap, as you would expect, because depression is still part of this, right? So the neurotransmitter piece is very similar, except that it could go in either direction now. So too much serotonin and norepinephrine and dopamine, or not enough serotonin, norepinephrine, and dopamine. Interesting, antidepressants oftentimes carry warnings that come with them. We talked about side effects of them. So one side effect of antidepressants is that they can cause more depression and suicidality that wasn't there, right? And that's incredibly frustrating, obviously, when that happens, but they can also cause manic episodes. And that's something that's typically in there as well. So what you might see is somebody starts like an SSRI, like Zoloft, for example, and all of a sudden they have a manic episode for the first time because they have too much serotonin, too much norepinephrine, too much dopamine, and then we have to scale the dose back or maybe try a different medication. So what we see is that now we have overactivity or underactivity. It can go either way. But we add an element here, which is interesting, like you were asking about, ion activity. So remember, when neurons communicate with each other, it's an electrochemical process. The electrical piece is controlled by ions. The chemical piece, neurotransmitters, right? So this electrical piece, it's thought that it's almost like the ions might be firing too easily or stubbornly, right? And so when we get to the treatments, one of the treatments focuses on the ion level instead of the neurotransmitter level, which is kind of interesting. Ions are made out of, like one of them is sodium, right? And so lithium, which is a naturally occurring mineral salt, works on that. So it's kind of interesting connection here. There's a couple of brain structures that are thought to potentially play a role, but we don't fully understand how or why. It's more correlational. And it can be very genetic. right? Just like depression, which has a genetic component, bipolar disorder has a strong genetic component as well. Again, you're not doomed to get it. I grew up with a mom who has bipolar disorder, and I don't have bipolar disorder, thankfully. It's something that you could get, but you're, by no means doomed to get. You're just more vulnerable than the average person. So treatments, mood stabilizers are really the most common, right? So if somebody has bipolar disorder, like bipolar 1, they're going like this, right? They're kind of going up and down and up and down and up and down with normal mood in the middle. A mood stabilizer kind of puts you more like that, right? It brings the highs down and the lows up. I had to think about that for a second, but it kind of puts you more in the middle, stabilizing your mood. And there are a lot of different mood stabilizers. The most commonly used one is a drug called lithium. Lithium, as I mentioned a second ago, is a metallic element. It's on the periodic table of elements, right? It's a naturally occurring mineral salt that is thought to be pretty effective for bipolar disorder. It helps more with the mania than the depression. So it might be that someone takes lithium and an antidepressant. But lithium is a dangerous drug, right? If you've ever known anyone who's taken lithium, it requires regular blood testing. You can suffer lithium like toxicity. It can be deadly if you have too much of it in your system. It can cause like Parkinsonian effects like shaking or tremors if you have too much of it. It's not the easiest drug to tolerate, which is why it's requires like regular blood tests, like every couple of weeks, just to make sure it's at a proper level. And there's some interesting like side effects of it too. A lot of people who take mood stabilizers talk about feeling very blunted, right? Or very almost like flat. And you can see why, right? If we take your highs and bring them down, and we take your lows and bring them up, and you're just in the middle, right? There's like a level of apathy that can come with that. There's a level of like flatness or almost feeling like a zombie, like sedated or apathetic that can come with that. So it can be wildly helpful, but a lot of people write about or talk about that as like a negative side effect as well. And I have a song that I think kind of highlights that. There's a couple of songs about lithium. Evanescence, I think hers is the best one. The Nirvana song about lithium is more like abstract. This one's very concrete in a sense. I'm a very concrete thinker, so in my mind, she's singing about the drug the whole time, right? You can interpret it however you would like, but I want to play the video for you, like commentary on this medication, right? Like she's talking about like how it helps her. Like she doesn't want to let like that use of that drug go. She needs it, but she hates it. It's like this love-hate relationship that she has with this medication. And that's something that a lot of people report. Again, like having everything just feel so muted in the middle, like there can be this loss of self that comes with that a little bit, but it can also be incredibly helpful when people's mood swings are so erratic and now they're a little bit calmer in the middle. That can obviously help them to function much better. And it's very common, as I mentioned, when someone takes something like lithium along with an antidepressant and therapy. But therapy alone doesn't tend to be enough for bipolar disorder. If it's severe, oftentimes people do require some degree of medication, and they might even end up on an antipsychotic drug if the symptoms of mania are intensive, right? Like Abilify, for example, is a common like antidepressant, antipsychotic that is sometimes used for things like this if it's pronounced. So again, a lot of treatments. It's very similar to depression, but adding mood stabilizers as well. Other like thoughts, questions, stories, comments, anything? Yeah.
You can't be on lithium when you need ECT. So
Yeah.
that's taken off. But he's never needed it back because the ECT took care of it.
Which is great, right?
But mommy taught me to write down everything. So I have about 15 single-spaced pages. All the different lead changes,
Yeah.
date, yeah, how his mood was. So that was really handy with me. I'm turns up your
Sure.
How do you remember all?
Yeah.
But a spider story. He hated spiders when he was little, and then at one point in the hospital, he was hallucinating spiders, and I was like,
That's just cruel right there. That's awful.
Spider. So I said one day, I'm like, how big is it? Like, does it fit in my hand? And he goes,
Like,
Two hands.
And I'm like, so if I walk through the room, am I stepping on them? And he's like, no, they move away. And they were all different colors at different times. Recently helped him with his moods.
Oh,
And now.
night spiders, right?
Yeah.
There's no such thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean the hallucinations that can come with that are frightening. At least they were kind, right? I mean, if you had to see a fake spider, it better be a nice spider, right? Like the ones in my yard with their hats, right? Like they're so friendly. All right. Anything else related to mood disorders? I want to move on for just a little bit. We'll spend a little bit of time here on chapter 9 just to start it today. Okay. So our next topic then, eating disorders, and then we go to substance disorders after that, before this unit is done. And so we'll look at, there are 3 big eating disorders. There used to only be 2, but there are 3 now: anorexia, bulimia, and binge eating disorder. And then we'll look at some causes and treatments as well. These are a very difficult group of disorders in the sense that they are hard to treat, right? It can be difficult to treat these because think how often hunger and food come into play in our lives, and how complicated something that seems as simple as eating can become. Easy example, right? Think about how many of you eat when you're bored, out of show of hands. I am so guilty of this. I don't know what to do with myself. I'm gonna go eat something. How many of you eat when you're sad, right? I eat when I'm grading. That's dangerous, right? So next time I'm grading something of yours, know that I probably ate an entire carton of goldfish in the process. Like it's almost mindless, right? How many of you go out to eat to celebrate something good, right? I got all good grades, something good happened, let's go out to eat, right? My family growing up, it was if I got all A's, I got ice cream, right? And so we go out to ice cream. My parents, one of the worst things you can do to somebody, don't use food as a punisher. You don't want to do that in general. It creates too complicated of a relationship. But whenever we'd get in trouble, my brother and I, they'd take away my desserts because it worked for me. Like desserts were like my biggest favorite thing in life. They still are, really. I mean, like if we're honest here. And so whenever we'd fight, it'd be like no dessert for the night, and I'd cry. And then we'd fight really bad, no dessert for the week. Once it was like no dessert for the year, I'm like, make it forever. It might as well be forever. My life is over. And but our relationships with food are complicated. I won't go to a movie unless I'm gonna have popcorn. Like, why bother? Like, if I'm honest, right? The holidays become a lot about food for people. Food has a lot of loaded meanings to it. And so our relationship with food can get complicated, right? And that can be problematic sometimes for people, right? And lead to issues with weight. And so when we're talking about eating disorders, we're talking about disturbances in eating. But just know that it's not as simple as like, I'm hungry, so I eat, and I'm full, so I stop. There are psychological factors that can kind of overwhelm our physical ones. So people are not listening to their body. Or maybe you are so used to not listening to your body, you're not even aware of it anymore. You just ignore being hungry, or you ignore being full, or you're eating for other reasons and motivations. And that's really common. And a lot of us might have some like warning signs with this. It doesn't necessarily mean you have an eating disorder, but it could escalate or be problematic, at some point if it continued. So when it comes to eating disorders, again, we don't always just eat for physical reasons, right? A lot of very common reasons why we might eat. So we're going to look at, as I said, kind of 3 disorders, 2 big ones, and then 1 newer one. I have a little promo video that I want to play for you, and we have this in our library if you want to watch the whole thing. And then there was a great documentary on Netflix not that long ago as well. That is another kind of good pop culture reference. But I want to show you the first few minutes or like this promo video of a documentary called Thin. In case you haven't ever known anyone with an eating disorder, I think it's a nice like portrayal. It's about a group of young women who are at a treatment facility, and you get to kind of see some elements of what this can look like for people. So I want to play this for you. It's about like 6-7 minutes, just kind of introducing the documentary. But I think it's a good portrayal of what, and then eliminating that or purging it in some way, just a lot, right? And again, if you've known someone with An eating disorder, like it is something that can be a lot, right? Because it comes up all the time, right? We need food in order to survive, right? Which is what makes it so challenging and difficult at times. So a lot of the people in that video definitely struggling with what we would call anorexia or anorexia nervosa. And I love in that little clip that it shows you some of the elements of what this can look like for somebody who's struggling with it. And so with this disorder, we have an intense fear of gaining weight, right? To the point where people are very restrictive in what they allow themselves to eat, right? Like counting calories, maybe starving themselves at times. There's a very distorted body image that comes with it, right? And we often have images like this where somebody's looking in the mirror and they see themselves in their mind in a distorted way, like as much heavier than they actually are. In the video clip, right, she draws an image of herself, right? And then traces her actual self. And you can see that her actual self was quite a bit smaller than the image that she drew. That focus on parts of her body of like need to tone, abdominoplasty, help me, right? Like all of those things kind of showing that obsession and that distorted body image, which is so common with this. So people who have this disorder refuse to maintain a normal body weight for their height and their age. Now it's tricky. What does normal body weight mean, right? It doesn't take into account like your bone density and all sorts of other factors. So they tend to define it as like less than 85% of what's expected for your height and weight. So we'd say less than 85% of what is expected for your height and age, sorry. So there's all those growth charts, right, of like the range that we're supposed to be in, looking at things like your body mass index or BMI, which isn't the most fun thing to have calculated if you've ever had that done. But looking at this, right, you would be underweight by definition. Right now, sometimes people don't meet this criteria, right? Maybe they're very overweight, but they're following these same patterns. And you can see that as well. With every group of disorders, there's always one called not otherwise specified, where maybe somebody doesn't quite fit neatly into it. And that's something that we see a fair amount with eating disorders, especially because of this criteria. But there's a very distorted body image. Oftentimes that starvation piece can cause people to lose their hair, lose their toenails and fingernails, to not get menstrual cycles anymore, to feel tired and sick all the time or be very frail and weak. All of those things are relatively common. 95% of cases of this occur in people who are female. Much more common in women than in men. And it's typically between the ages of 14 to 18 years old that we see this to kind of be the most prevalent or start to develop. Now, it can definitely occur in men as well, right? And we actually see more and more cases occurring in men than we have in the past. Sometimes it can take an interesting variant in men, where men feel like they have to get bigger and bigger and more bulky and muscular, because the physical norm or the attractiveness norm for men is to be muscular and strong and bigger. And the physical attractiveness norm for women is to be small and skinny and like tiny, right? And so those norms, which we'll talk about more next time, can play a role in why we see it more in women and why we see it more in young women specifically. But it can obviously affect men as well. So again, with this one, what we're seeing is a lot of very like restricted eating, counting calories, not consuming enough, ignoring being hungry, right? And just not eating, right? Even something small might be too much to want to put into your system, because you're afraid if you eat it, you're going to gain weight, right? And so a lot of education comes into play when we talk about treatment. Stories or thoughts or comments about anorexia? Yeah.
We believe that my grandmother has this, and we don't talk to her anymore for other reasons, but like I remember growing up and like she would eat once a day and it would be dinner time, and like my grandfather would like have like a full plate of food, and us kids would have a full plate of food, and she'd have like maybe a piece of chicken. And like I remember like spending the night at her house, and like we'd sleep in the same bed and just not being able to sleep because all I could hear is her stomach growling.
Oh, yeah.
And like she just like, and it was always just like she was always so concerned that like she would gain weight, and she's super thin.
Yeah.
And like, you know, like to a point where like we would tell her like you need to eat more.
Sure.
Because you're getting to like the other side of it where you're unhealthy because you're
Yeah.
not eating. And she'd be like, oh, here's my snack, 5 crackers. And she'd like count them out. And like that was what she would have like for an entire day.
Yeah.
It was like really bad for a
Yeah.
while.
That's hard, right? And like it's that extremeness of it that like makes it an eating disorder. Because a lot of people count calories. A lot of people want to lose weight. It's something like 2/3 of people at any given time are on a diet, like always, right? Like it's very, very common for people to watch what they eat, to think about their calories. Intermittent fasting has become like so popular, right? We do it in our house, even like we don't eat after 6 and then we don't eat again until like breakfast, right? So after dinner we stop, and like it's like our one concession. You can eat anything you want. I'll be sitting there eating brownies up till 6 o'clock, but at 6 I can't eat them anymore. Right. And so like doing things like that, or wanting to lose weight, or going to the gym and working out, although those things are healthy, they can just go too far. Right. Because there's nothing wrong with being like, okay, I'm going to have 5 crackers because that's the serving size. But when you're counting them and you're afraid you're going to gain weight and you're ignoring being hungry and all those other things, is where it transitions from this to something more severe. Right. Yeah.
I had a roommate in college and she finally told me anorexia and bulimia about half her life at that point. I think she pretty much lived on diet coke. And she wouldn't answer the calls from the health center.
Uh-huh.
And then finally they caught her up to her. And I just came home from class and she was like, I'm leaving in a few hours. She only had a few months to graduate. But the health center had said I was probably going to find her. And her biggest fear was going to residential.
Yeah. Which is really common with this, to be
That's
residential.
sure.
Yeah. It's a very intense issue for some people. And again, like anything on a spectrum, some people this is totally mild and like under control. And other people it's a huge problem, and it can require hospitalization and be life-threatening. I'm gonna stop there for today, but I have one more thing I need from you to do before we're done. I don't 100% know why, but my dean, and whenever your dean asks you to do something, you do it, right? Like your boss, whoever it might be, she's my boss, asked me to project up a code for all of you to fill out a survey. And so I'm going to do that. It is a survey about the facility's master plan. They want student input related to on-ground classes and things moving forward. And I guess our class was randomly selected. I don't know. I don't know what the methods are of that. So I'm going to project this code up for you. If you have a smartphone and you are able to do this, that would be really helpful. When you're done, you're welcome to go. She said it should take like 5 to 10 minutes. So I'm giving you plenty of time. If you have a minute to do this, if you don't want to do it or don't have a phone or are not interested, that is okay. But if you could, that would be great. They're trying to get your feedback as students on-ground classes and like the facilities plan for the campus. So it's kind of your chance to have a voice. Yeah.
Last week on Friday, we asked us to take this in intro behavioral research.
Okay. Yeah. So you were randomly selected there too, right? Yeah, I would. I have a feeling it might be a lot of people. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, do it again really quickly. Hopefully that means it's really fast for you, right? So when you're done with this, welcome to go. Thank you for taking a moment to do it if you're willing. And then on Monday when I see you, we'll keep going with the topic of eating disorders and we'll keep working through that. And then we'll be our.
Is the raw URL available somewhere?
I can email it to you. You want me to email it to you? Okay.
Yeah, then I can just look at it.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.